Hey, what's happening, everybody? Wanted to do a video on boots. I've been working with Crispi Boots for quite a long time now. I actually was first just a loyal customer, and then was fortunate to start working with them a couple years ago. So I've gathered up some of my Crispi Boots that I feel will cover a lot of needs that you might encounter, whether you're hiking or hunting, tree stand hunting, or whatever the case may be. So start off right out of the gate. This is the Laponia. It's one of their lighter boots that they make. It's not as aggressive on the sole. It doesn't have like a real deep cleat to it, and it is a Flex 2. Now, something you'll find on the Crispi website is you'll see a flex rating for each boot. The higher the number, the stiffer it's going to be. This is what they're referring to as their flex rating. So this one's a 2, so it's pretty soft. I mean, this is almost going to be like a tennis shoe, you know, kind of comfort and flex in there. A little stiffer than say like just like a regular pair of New Balance or Nike or something like that, you know, tennis shoe. But that would be considered probably a Flex 1 if they use that rating. But it's really close, super lightweight. I've hunted this boot in Montana during antelope archery season. It was really nice. You can see the construction on it, how you don't have a tongue that's going to fall down on you. It's actually all one piece in there. And it's just a really nice overall boot. Now the next is the crossover. Now this is a boot that a lot of times I'll wear checking trail cameras. It's actually a functional boot that I'll wear out in town if I'm going out to eat or something like that. This boot is also a Flex 2. It feels a little stiffer, but once you actually have it on, you can tell that it's a Flex 2. Again, it's got the same neoprene tongue, and it's all one piece, so you don't have to worry about a tongue slipping down or going to the one side or the other. This one's, I didn't clean these very good. This one is maybe a little more aggressive as far as the cleat goes. But it's also just a really nice boot. It's lightweight. You can see that it's not super tall as well. Now this boot kind of goes the other way. This is what they call the Ativa. Now the Ativa actually is a Flex 2, but you'll see that it's a little more aggressive. An awesome hiker. Cross training if you're running some trails or hiking some trails in the timber, even if it's gravel, park type trails. A very breathable boot. This one has the boa system on it. Well, it's a manual boa, but this one with the drawstring, you'll pull this up and then you can cinch that down off like you see in like a pair of Solomon's, in their boots. But this is a real functional boot. Small. They do make this in a regular like tennis shoe. This is the mid, but again, the same neoprene tongue that's not going to fall down on you. They also make this in a black that's really good looking boot too. So this is a boot that I do wear and I hunt and hike out of. This is one that I do hunt a little bit, but mostly hike and more function. This would be one for more trails or running or something like that. Now we're going to get into some of the boots that I've actually put through the paces a lot more, that fit more of my everyday hunting lifestyle. The Thor II. So they came out originally with the Thors, and then they redid them, and they changed some of the puncture resistant textiles that they have on the outside, and just basically called it the Thor II. But they offer it in orange, and then this one is their olive. But you can also see on this boot, this is another one that's not super tall. It doesn't have a big tall shank. I don't like having boots all the way up, to the base of my calf. I just don't I just don't like that all the way up my leg and having that constriction. This one is a solid tongue. This piece is detached, but it comes all the way up to here, and it's all one piece. This is a Gore-Tex boot. This one, you can see the sole on it, not really deep lugged, but this one is a Flex 4. So this is a stiff boot. And I've gone back and forth with people, and they look at the different boots and they say, well, I don't know that I want a stiff boot. That just seems too stiff to me. But if you look at like goats and sheep and things like that, when they're climbing mountains, they don't have like articulating ankles. They're just kind of post holing, you know what I mean? Just going straight up mountains. So having the stiffer Flex, I found out because I'm from Kentucky and then living in Iowa, before I went Western hunting, I probably wouldn't have realized that there was a difference in boots. And then once you put them through those applications and you start to realize what certain boots are made for and what they do. The Thor II has very quickly become my favorite Crispi boot all around. And that was a tough thing to do because the next boot previously was my favorite. Now, that being said, if somebody said I can only wear one boot the rest of my life for hunting, hiking, whatever, there is one boot in mind, and it's this one right here. It's the first boot that I started with. This is actually my third pair that I've had of these boots, but this is the Nevada Legend GTX. What I like about this one is you do have that leather tongue that's one piece. Fairly aggressive cleat on the bottom, but you got the Vibram sole. This one is a Flex 3, so it's kind of that middle of the road in between that 2 and the 4, but this one also has 200 grams of Thinsulate in it. Now they do make this in a non-insulated version, but what I have found out, if it's a high quality boot, even though it's got 200 grams of insulation in there, do your feet get warm? Yes. Is it annoying to where you can't deal with it and they get sweaty? Not at all. 2 pair of lightweight merino socks in the winter, and this boot will get me down to those 10, it'll get me down to those 15, 20 degree days, and I typically don't have an issue. If it's going to be a really long tree stand set, then I have to go to another option. But that's pretty cold with a boot that's structured like this. That's not a big giant boot. Also, there's like the Arctic Shield, those slip-on deals, those booties that you can put on. And this is a small enough boot that you can put that on, and it's not super cumbersome as well. But I love the Nevada Legend. It's just it's a killer boot, and it's a good looking boot as well. Now this one, the Colorado. The Colorado is also a Flex 4 like the Thor II is. Really stiff boot. To me, it's a good looking boot. I've taken this boot on some elk hunts, some elk shed hunting trips before. I will say for me, and everybody's feet are different. Everybody's style of hiking is different, and the shape of their feet are different. The Laponia, the Thor II, the Nevadas, I had 0 break-in time. The Colorado, for me, had a little bit of break-in time. It took about that day 2 to day 4 for me that the boot really started to mold to my foot and everything kind of worked in. And but I love this boot. Like I said, I think it's a great looking boot. Definitely really aggressive on the tread, but it's got that Vibram sole, and it's a nice, really nice boot. Same thing, sticking with the same deal that Crispi does with the tongue. And the last boot that I've got here to show you is a new boot for them this year. I'm sorry, last year. It was a new boot last year. They were able to launch it at the ATA show, and then unfortunately COVID came in, shortly thereafter. So I feel like this boot kind of got slept on a little bit. Now, right off the bat, it is a tall boot. That is one thing that I personally am not a huge fan of for my personal preference, but this is the Rock GTX, and this one is 800 grams of thinsulate. You know, typically when you get into a boot that's got 800 gram, it's just going to be a bigger, bulkier boot anyways, and they've done a really good job with this. It's got the one piece on the tongue like that, where your tongue's not going to slip down. What I do for me personally is I don't lace the boot all the way up, and that kind of is that nice compromise for me, where I can leave the top of this boot a little open and I still feel like I have some flex, you know, on that shank. I know some guys, I see them all the time, they'll have their boots laced all the way up, you know, all the way up to the top, and that's, you know, again, personal preference. But this boot, I actually had the opportunity to hunt out of it a lot this past year when I was in Kansas and in Iowa on some nasty cold days. This boot was in those like 5-degree, 10-degree days, and it was awesome. 1-2 pair of socks, it didn't matter. This boot just simply performs and keeps your feet warm. It's a pricey boot, but you know, I've gotten 1 full year out of this boot, and I have no reasons to believe that I won't get 5-6 years out of this boot, because this is, for me, this isn't going to be a boot that I'm going to wear every day. It's going to be when the temperatures get really cold. As far as longevity of the boots goes, that leads into the next thing: boot maintenance. So Crispi makes a waterproofing conditioning spray, and then they also have the conditioning cream. So the sprays I'll use on any of the fabrics, any of the Gore-Tex fabrics, the leather, the suede type materials, the nubuck materials, and then like on these webbing textiles. And then the waterproofing conditioning cream, that'll go on any of the smooth, soft leathers, like on the Nevada and on the Wild Rock. So I'm going to show how that works now. This is the waterproofing conditioning spray. Easy application. Obviously you want to get any of the soil, any dirt, get that off there, and then make sure that the boot's good and dry. These I actually took outside with a scrub brush and the garden hose and kind of scrubbed them down. And then here in Iowa this summer, it doesn't take long for stuff to dry out. So all you're going to do with these is just give everything a good liberal spray. And I want it to try to soak in to different places, especially along the tongue and these other fabrics. You know, there's like a leather on the back side here. So that boot, you can tell everything's completely saturated down in there. Move on to the next one. This spray will dry, and as it dries, then you're going to have that water repellent barrier on there, and it's kind of cool, especially when you go out and you're seeing water just beat up on the boots. So that is Crispi's waterproofing conditioning spray. Now we'll go to something different, like the Nevada Legends. You know, this is it's a soft leather, you know, and it's smooth. So using the Crispi waterproofing conditioning cream, I usually will do this a couple of times each season, but maybe none so more important than that first one before the season kicks off. You know, the summer is a great time to get all of your gear, go through it all, and make sure anything, if it needs to be repaired or replaced, to start going through stuff. Better to find out now than in the middle of a hunt. So they give you this little sponge, kind of an applicator. You can use that, you can use a rag. I'll use this until this thing, you know, gets torn up, and then I'll go to a different, you know, have to use my own rag or something. But I actually put this on pretty thick to start, and just make sure that I really get it worked in. Areas that you'll start to see boots typically get dry, and they might, you know, crack or something, is usually right around any of these metal components. But it's also a place where they have punched a hole in that leather, so moisture can also get into, you know, permeate inside there a little bit easier. So I always want to put a little extra time on those type places. Now this typically is not as important to me, because you've got pant legs or a pair of gaiters that's going to cover a lot of that stuff. So I won't typically spend a lot of time around the, you know, once I get past the ankle. But the back of the boots are super important for me. You can even see some of the abrasion, and that's another way of looking at it, is just look at the boot and see where you've got some wear areas. That's going to tell you how you're treating your boots and where you potentially might end up, you know, kind of springing a leak. Now, another thing you can do is pull all of your laces back out, so you can really get down in there and get in the tongue. Something else you can do is actually just take your finger, and you can actually just work that conditioning cream down in there as well. You know, again, these are areas that are going to be exposed a lot, that are going to take a lot of the pressure. Now, if you've got areas of your leather that are prone to drying out, these are going to be areas where it's going to leak. Wet socks are not cool. So you do have a Gore-Tex layer. That's going to help you. And that's going to keep everything resistant. But if you start getting dry rotted leather, then you're going to start defeating the purpose. So make sure you work that into the leather. You know, this isn't like, you know, your granddad's leather shoes that once you put on the paste, you got to come back and buff it back off later. This is rub it in and actually just let it do its thing. Let it soak into the leather. And then you're good.